The balance sheet of the Wyong Turf Club in 1985 showed a loss of $22,912, but since then it's been champagne sailing, albeit with a lot of hard yakka. The last financial year has seen an increase of 23% on the 1988-89 result, with a record profit of $718,597 from its galloping, greyhound and harness racing operations. 4 other records were also set, over $1 million in prize money distributed, a TAB turnover on the gallops alone exceeding $45 million, on-course tote turnover of nearly $15.5 million, and the bookmakers held $14.75 million. Not bad for a struggling club. For elated Secretary-Manager John Varley, it's more than just hard work.
Mainly team effort, I think. The committee, it's a completely new committee in the last 5 years, ably led by Paul Levick as a very strong chairman and good chairman, and a good team effort. The whole right from the staff, ground staff, internal staff and the committee. They work as a team together, and that's the name of the game, I think.
And the future looks rosy, from the humble days of Tent City way back in the early 1900s to more recent times of a couple of useful grandstands but inadequate facilities, to the year 2000 with a stunning new grandstand which is well underway and due for completion in March 1990. And the 3-level redevelopment means more to Wyong than just a centre of excellence for racing.
With the new facilities, of course, there'll be a lot of community projects in mind, and they'll be used by the community. It's going to be a great thing for Wyong itself.
Front page news for some today. The Lake Macquarie alcohol affair was the cause of much mirth in Ivan Welsh's chambers.
I'll drink to that.
State Labor MLC Paul O'Grady claims the liquor bill rose from $1,700 in 1985 to $7,200 in 1989. But according to several aldermen, such comparisons are completely unrealistic.
What's happening now is that there is a greater involvement. The aldermen are here more or less on a daily basis. The staff officers are here on a daily basis. And I think if you were to do an expose, if you like, on what's happening on a daily basis around here, you would find that all of the committees are meeting much, much more regularly.
A city the size of this, there is a lot of entertaining done, and I would doubt very much whether it's much different. The bill is much different to any other council of a similar size throughout the city.
If a full analysis was done, I think you'd find that the civic receptions we've had, we've entertained numbers of Japanese parties here that have been coming through visiting the cities, and many other delegations and other civic receptions.
However, according to Alderman Doug Carley, alcohol has no place in council business.
There is no necessity for liquor to be consumed during business hours. I think that in any business, be it private or public, the officers and those responsible for carrying out that business would need to be doing it in complete sobriety.
But despite Alderman Carley's opposition, the Lake Macquarie alcohol policy did not cause undue concern at other local councils. Wyong Shire Clerk John Burgess says entertaining costs can be high in a busy growth centre, with functions, ceremonies and meetings often requiring refreshments. Singleton and Maitland councils also provide refreshment for aldermen after meetings. Newcastle City Council has it available, though says it is seldom used. The only council canvass that did not supply spirits for its aldermen was Cessnock.
State Housing Minister Joe Shipp blew the whistle on fraud squad activities in Newcastle in mid-November. Since then, the Sydney police operation, codenamed Choke, has remained tight-lipped about the extent of its inquiries. However, a detective leading the investigation confirmed today that the operation was looking at fraud offences with a potential value of more than $5 million. About half a dozen insurance companies are assisting the detectives with more than 1,000 cases of significant fraud. Although it's not yet established how many of these matters will go to court, many of the inquiries are concerned with claims of around $30,000 to $50,000. The detectives, who are working from the GIO headquarters in Newcastle, were anxious to stress they are not concerned with policyholders or insurance companies, but with the assessors and builders they suspect of wildly overclaiming on damage estimates. The inquiry involves intensive research, and police say they don't expect to lay charges until early 1991. Ambulance officers are leaving their old centre without regrets. The ageing building suffered severe structural damage during last year's earthquake, and since then conditions have deteriorated. Repairs and renovations could have been carried out with the Newcastle ambulance fleet still on the premises, but the work, to cost $1.2 million, would have taken 18 months. By relocating the 12 ambulances, work time will be cut to just 6 months. The ambulances will operate from a temporary base at the UTA bus depot just a few hundred metres away from their damaged headquarters. All the comforts of home have been installed in portable work sheds for 23 paramedics and 50 ambulance officers who'll share quarters in shifts. Not all the facilities will be moved. The operations room, which coordinates communications for the entire Hunter region, will remain in the old building. The technical difficulties associated with the move were considered too complex. Although the ambulances are now some distance from the communications centre, officials say the public won't notice any difference in response times to emergencies.
Virtually what we've done is turned the UTA depot here into a substation that you would see in and around the suburbs where the ambulance stations exist there, so there's no problem at all.
Newcastle Police have been doing their homework. Chief Inspector Ian Cleary says a weekly review of crime statistics for the city has enabled police to crack down on trouble spots and greatly reduce street crime.
Once we recognise a trend is starting to develop, we have special operations. We put police out in a covert situation or high profile, and we attack it so that we eradicate that problem from a policing point of view and also the community's point of view out of the patrol.
The official figures are yet to be released, but the public is already feeling the effects. A police survey has found many people are afraid to take to the streets of their own neighbourhood alone after dark. But Newcastle is the only region in northern New South Wales where that feeling is decreasing. The fear factor has fallen from 48 to 45% over the last 2 years, while in Gosford it has risen from 42 to 48% and in Maitland from 39 to 47%. Newcastle streets should become even safer from Friday when beat policing is launched in the city.
We're putting them into the most important areas, attacking the problem, eradicating the problem, and then we'll get settled down to more community-related problems and talking to the people more generally, and we hope that'll happen early in the new year.
The Express berthed at Newcastle this morning to load its third cargo since it was launched in Japan 2 months ago. Its owners, Howard Smith, describe it as the first of a new generation of vessels designed for the 1990s. Self-discharging equipment on the Express makes wharf labour redundant, and thanks to forward and aft thrusters it can dock itself without tugboats. Soon it may also be able to enter port without a pilot. The Express uses less crew than any similar vessel now registered in Australia. On board, there are only 18 men.
At any one time, we're working 2 plus day workers during the day and watchkeepers. The engine room, of course, is at night is automatic, and that's alarmed, so they can come down straight away when they're called.
Technology on the bridge includes touch-activated radar screens and hydraulic systems to control loading. Multi-skilling also reduces staff levels. The captain now does the radio operator's job. Cargo holds are lined with Teflon, which ensures loads slip easily onto conveyor belts for discharging. The ship's owners say crewing is now highly competitive with overseas operations.
Do you feel that it's possible to reduce those levels any further?
That's a very pointed question. Yes, it can be, but I think we need a lot more technology on the vessels. I hope it doesn't go too much lower, because I think most people are stretched to the limit now.
The Express is expected to dock at Newcastle every 6 weeks or so, picking up coal or wheat for markets in Tasmania. Tom Hilston, NBN News.
With the opening of the new hospital just months away, residents of New Lambton last night called a public meeting to voice their concern over a possible shortage of parking on hospital grounds. At peak capacity next year, the 500-bed hospital will employ around 1,500 people. All up, the hospital has just over 1,000 parking spaces on site, and according to a recent traffic study by Sinclair Knight, that is more than adequate. But residents feel otherwise and believe a decision to charge staff and visitors to park will force vehicles into nearby Lookout and Ridgeway roads and Crowder Street South.
If you worked there and you had to pay for parking when you worked there and there was free parking on the street, what would you do? I know what I'd do. I'd park where it was free.
Although no definite decision has been made, it looks like staff will be paying around $200 a year for a car park.
That car park represents a substantial taxpayer's asset. It will have to be maintained, have to be controlled. We'll have to have, whatever we do, we'll have to have various boom gates and traffic officers on it, which is all an ongoing cost to the taxpayer. So do you want to pay for it through your taxes, or do you want to pay for it when you use it?
But parking isn't the only concern of residents. The Sinclair Knight traffic report recommended a 4-lane road at the entrance to the hospital. Anything else would be ineffective. What's been built is a 2-lane road leading off this roundabout.
What they do to improve that, I don't know. I think it'll just be bedlam.
But the hospital claims the entrance road is not their responsibility.
I acknowledge that the traffic report says a 4-lane highway would be the most efficient. And we will be asking the traffic authority who controls that road what they intend or what is to be put there.
Peter Ward leads a quiet life near Nelson Bay, enjoying an idyllic view from his rented home. But he says the setting can't make him forget the shock 2 years ago of being told his wife for 12 years, Maxine, had been brutally murdered and that he was the prime suspect.
I can't fathom out why the police move so quick, because to me it's just not logical for it to happen that way.
Peter spent 7 months on remand in a South Australian prison where he studied the case against him.
Well, I couldn't believe it, reading their statements, because all of a sudden I've got no good points. All I could find was bad points.
Eventually, police dropped the case, but Peter is still fighting for compensation.
Financially, it's hurt me. Something shocking, because being in jail, you can't pay your bills and they get behind, and as that stands out now, I can't get credit anywhere because of what's happened to me.
Peter says he was moved to speak out after seeing reports on NBN News of the case of Queanbeyan man Johan Poll, who spent 10 years in jail for murdering his wife. The case is now under review after another person allegedly confessed to the murder.
I tell you what, every time I hear of someone being charged with murder, I say to myself, I hope to God that they've got the right bloke. But when I hear of someone being murdered, I get a silly sensation right through me, because I know what it's like to lose someone so close.
There is a footnote to Peter's case. Some months ago, long after the charges against him were dropped, another person was charged with his wife's murder. That case will be heard early next year.
Roger Clark has carved a lot of notches in his flying belt since he joined the RAF at the tender age of 19, with just one thing in mind.
I wanted to be a fighter pilot.
Since then, he's climbed into the cockpits of everything from Caribous to Canberras, Wingeals to Mackies. But the 41-year-old wing commander's fondest memories are of his days with a plane he calls the French Lady. Do you miss them?
Nostalgically, yes. Great aircraft to fly. This aircraft was the one I did my first Mirage solo in, and I can still remember the day I got airborne out of here doing that.
What was it like when you climbed out of a Mirage and into the cockpit of a Hornet the first time?
A generation gap. I think it's one of the times where the designers have built an aircraft that the fighter pilots won't.
Roger was aboard the first Hornet to clock up 1,000 hours for the RAF when it flew into Williamtown in July 1988. In his 3.5 years as commanding officer of Williamtown's 2 OCU unit, the RAF's foremost fighter training facility, Roger pioneered the first FCI or Top Gun course, but he says the responsibility of shaping our future fighting forces has begun to take its toll.
Like all fighter pilots, I guess I'm a perfectionist, and it becomes difficult to do 50% of your time in the paperwork and then come out to fly and still do a decent job.
Into Roger's shoes will step Wing Commander Kerry Clark, fresh from a posting in Washington. He's recently converted to the Hornets to ensure he's in touch with his squadron and says he now knows what the attraction has been for Roger.
It's not a particular pressure. In fact, I see it being more of a joy. It certainly is good to take young people and turn them into professionals. I joined the Air Force to fly, and this is one of the best flying jobs you can get.
As for Roger, well, he's off to Western Australia and most likely a job with a commercial airline, a role he admits might take a little getting used to.
I don't think I'll be dropping many bombs, but I guess there'll be challenges there as well.
200 students were in class when the Mackie jet ploughed into the side of the building. Dozens of people were trapped under debris, most badly burned. The only way out was through windows, with firemen helping the injured to safety. Others were forced to take refuge on the roof. The grounds of the school became a makeshift hospital as ambulances ferried almost 100 students, some critically injured and overcome by fumes, to emergency centres. 12 people died in the accident. The trainee pilot managed to eject from the plane before it crashed. His last radio message indicated the controls had jammed. Witnesses say the plane was on fire before it slammed into the school. The federal government's decision in September not to relocate the Australian Maritime Safety Authority in Newcastle caused an unparalleled political and community backlash. A delegation led by federal MP Peter Morris met with the Prime Minister and asked him to consider locating just their headquarters in the city, leaving the operational side in Canberra. Today, that delegation was told they were unsuccessful, and independent reporters found there would be significant operational difficulties if the headquarters was relocated here.
The difficulties in relation to communication between the actual units that had to go to say an emergency oil spill, handling that kind of thing, in relating to management of the unit, since it would be virtually an orphan section down in Canberra with nobody to take care of its control budget.
Although disappointed, Mr Morris is confident the inquiry was handled correctly and says the Prime Minister is very aware of the unpopular feeling in the region towards the Labor government.
I am absolutely sure he is very much aware of the damage that's been done to the credibility of the government and certainly the reflection upon him here in this region.
In a letter to Mr Morris, the Prime Minister guarantees the region will receive investment equal to the $10 million taken from it by the AMSA decision.
Well, there's some things we would look at that have been proposed previously, things like the upgrading of Williamtown Airport to domestic status and the transferring of the airport across to the two councils, Port Stephens and Newcastle. That will have a very, I think, beneficial effect in generating jobs in tourism and in the private sector.
It was something to jump up and down and clap about. The small brick and weatherboard school has nestled in the shadow of the Wattigan Mountains for the best part of a century. It's the centre point of a community that has relied on coal, timber and the railway for its livelihood. There are only 16 families with 31 infants and primary students enrolled at the school, and it's been a battle to win funding for additional class space. After a relocation and renovation process, they now have this building. It houses a staff and classroom as well as an administrative office. The Minister for Education, Virginia Chadwick, who opened the additions, was treated to some entertainment by the pupils. The original building is now set aside for infants classes after being used as a one-teacher tiered classroom, office and pantry-sized library. With the freeway and land developments in the pipeline, Awabra is considered a growth area and the school's outlook is secure. It celebrates its centenary next year.
Hip hip. Hooray! Hip hip. Hooray!